And if you'll share it with me when you're done, that would be great.
Yes, I will do that too. Um, so shall I introduce you, or you'd like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Melisa or Misha Cahnmann Taylor, and I have been faculty in language and literacy education for a long time, almost, or now going on 20 years. Yeah, pretty
Oh,
crazy. And my areas of focus have consistently been considerations of bilingualism and second or foreign or bilingual language acquisition. And my point of focus has changed from looking at immigrant youth in public US schools to looking at young people and adults born in the US and how they acquire foreign languages, to looking at foreign language education around the world, especially English as a foreign language. And yeah.
that's very interesting, because that was one of my questions, the evolution of your research interests. And I'll get back to it in a minute. So could you please tell us what courses have you taught, and are you teaching currently at language literacy education?
Okay, so right now this semester I'm teaching a doctoral seminar, 8 LLED, or it's also QUAL, QUAL 8950, which is arts-based research in education, because I am also trained as a poet, and I have done a lot of applied theater, and I use those artist skills in my social scientific research and my social science in my art making. I'm also teaching the class that you're in, which is LLED 6631. I have, in the last several years, been teaching it as an E class. So it's online, all asynchronous, and that's bilingualism and bilingual education. I have developed an interest in using theater as a reflexive and instructional practice for language teachers. And so I have that class, LLED 7504, Theater for Reflective ESOL, or language teaching practices.
Very interesting.
I have a class that I teach every summer numerous times, LLED 7040E and 5040E. That's the language and culture class that's a part of the 3-course ESOL endorsement sequence. The courses that I treasure every year are also my poetry classes. I have a LLED 7710 and LLED 8710 that usually I teach the 8,000 level every summer and the 7,000 every year. And that's poetry for creative language educators, or poetry for interdisciplinary understanding. So I teach teachers, I expect everyone's a novice poet, although I have had experienced poets from creative writing take my class also, and just generate new creative work about reflecting on languages and cultures and race and dilemmas of boundary crossing, and then think about the pedagogy, how poetry and the other arts can be incorporated into language classrooms. Those are just a few.
That is fascinating, and how deeply you connect. I read your interview, your recent published interview, how deeply you connect arts, and how you see the role of art in the research, in education. And coming back to the evolution of your research interest, have you always felt that art is so connected with the research, or it kind of came later from your experiences?
It's interesting. It's been with me the whole way through. I think when I started to fall in love with Spanish as a young middle and high school student, it was the art that motivated my language acquisition. When I listened to the most exquisite music and wanted to understand the lyrics, or would see a performance, how much I learned to perform myself on the stage of everyday life using the language. And if I thought about it as a performance, then it made it easier to step into new words and new structures and relationships. And then when I started my first job teaching 3rd and 4th grade as an elementary school teacher in South Central Los Angeles, I found that the arts were essential teaching tools and helped me not only to teach how to communicate in the target language of English and how to develop and maintain the kids' first language and literacy, but also it helped me to see the children more fully. If I was making art, I was also teaching like an artist. I was observing my students as an artist. I was appreciating what they brought to the table. And it helped me keep in check the tendency to police or legislate or control what they were producing, and helped me get into that place of wonder and surprise at what learners are able to produce. So engaging myself as a creative writer really helped me be, I think, a more creative and attentive and humble teacher and listener. And then I've just always loved art made by bilingual, translingual, transnational artists. I'm just really excited about what the artist can help give us access to, what it means to cross between different cultural and linguistic systems and live neither here nor there. The artists are really great at being in that in-between space and providing us the images and the language and the music to sit with uncertainty. So it's been a consistent part of my life, personal and professional.
That is very, very interesting. That's, for me personally, I love art myself, and so it's been very, I could relate in a lot of things. And what are some of the things that you're currently working on, maybe related to your poetry involvement or related to arts or academically, some current projects that you're working on and that you would like to share with us so to get more familiar?
Yeah, so I just got the artwork for my newest book. This is going to be the cover art for it. I'm super excited about it.
It is very cool.
Isn't that beautiful? It's by a trans artist named Molly Amos, I think. It says Alice, but I believe it's Molly Amos. Anyway, I just love how it stages and shows the diversity of hands. The book title that'll be coming out in February of 2021 is called Enlivening Education with Drama and Improv, a guide for second and foreign language teachers. Mm-hmm. And it comes out of many years of using theater and teaching language, learning language through theater, and then that course 7504 that I've been developing, which looks at, the elements of performance as methodology in teaching and learning languages. So I'm super excited. I just finished writing that with Kathleen McGovern, who is a PhD student who's completing her dissertation work now with us. And she came to UGA to work with me with her theater background. And we've really just inspired each other to put a collection together that builds on many prior theater game books that are written for actors or written for drama classes, but trying to lift the relevance of those things into the teaching and learning of other languages. So I'm very excited about that.
Because learning a foreign, it is kind of like assuming a role, like assuming a little bit of different identity. So I would imagine how that would correlate, how it would just feed to one another. So
yeah, and it takes practice, rehearsal. I think what artists do so well is they know that to get better, you have to fail. And I think a lot of times when we're teaching languages, we teach for correctness and we aspire to get the right answer. But really, language is so variable that when we look at, for example, the ethnography of communication that was authored by Del Himes, we see that what is feasible and possible isn't always necessarily what happens. That sometimes what we get done with language is beyond what is grammatical or what is even cognitively seems possible, that we have to use all the tools. We have to use facial expressions and gestures and intonation, and it's the full body experience. And if we never rehearse that, if we only memorize things cognitively, but we don't perform in the language and learn what to do when things go wrong, if we don't build those improv skills, then we're not really equipped in the moment. And I'm sure you've experienced that. I mean, I've definitely in the moment been like, what vocabulary do I need? I don't even.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And I am just out of personal curiosity, did you do any trials, like how that integrating theater performance in a classroom, how it affects the performance in a foreign language? Did you do any evaluations or assessment of that practice?
This is where I need you, Anastasia. I have, you know, they say that the problem with the arts in science is that the artists are too busy doing, and they don't always make enough time to do the steady and repeatable research and inquiry that we need to go with it. Now, I've done a lot of qualitative documentation of what this work does, how it makes one feel. In fact, in 2010, I wrote a book called Teachers Act Up. I'll show you that cover.
You have a blog with the same name. I'll probably put a link for that as well.
So Teachers Act Up, creating multicultural learning communities through theater. And that was a several years study of using these theater strategies with new bilingual teachers and documenting what they did, what was the outcome. And there are several things that have come out of that in terms of teacher retention and navigating recurring struggle and building networks of support and a menu of strategies, that there's never just one answer. So it was the experience of doing that work that led me to want to use those strategies with the student language learners themselves. And the next phase would be to do the research to really be able to show what happens when you use those strategies.
That is very promising, and gives us as new doctoral students, new researchers, to look into something. And
I would love to partner. I only have so much time and so much access, and I'm not currently teaching a language, so it really limits what I can do. But if definitely an invitation to doctoral students who might be interested in employing some of these strategies in their classroom to gauge their effectiveness, or helping to research someone else who will use those strategies in an English language environment or a foreign language teaching environment. Yeah.
it would be very rewarding. At least it will be very emotionally rewarding, I believe. I believe that would be very interesting to do. And I'm trying to see how can I connect with what I'd like to talk. You published in a lot of journals and a lot of different areas, even, I would say. You publish in the poetry journals and in academic journals. And could you give us some of your insight into publishing, how you find the journals where you would like to publish, and is there a certain technique to that, or how would you approach that?
Yeah, so I always keep my, there's some feedback. No, okay, it's working. Something strange happened. So one approach I have used and with great success has been to look for specific calls for content. So I have, I always have growing numbers of journals that I enjoy reading myself, that I find publish things I'm interested in, or have published people I'm interested in. So I keep my eyes on expanding the list of credible and valuable research journals. And I'm switching to looking for journals that have a wider impact, maybe our online journals, are more publicly accessible, because that's the place I am in my career. Earlier in the career, I was focused on trying to get journals that had high research impact, or, the more rigorous in terms of, fewer acceptances, things like that help promote your career. But now I want something that everybody can access and read. But anyway, if I see a journal that says they're looking for arts-based research or something. So I saw a journal recently in the journal JSTAE, Studies in Teaching, Arts and Education. And they had a theme of precarity. They were interested in theories of precarity. I like this word very much. We're in very precarious times. I was intrigued and I wanted to learn more, and I had just conducted a study of a project that I did in 2018, teaching a Mandarin language novel that was translated, and we'd done some work in the community. So I had that piece written, but it wasn't for a particular audience yet. And I thought, oh, I could shape this for art educators. And I could learn from the theme. And so I started to read about the theme of precarity and the resources that the journal editors pointed to. So I always see specific calls as invitations for me to learn more, to consider if my work fits in that theme. And then the other step is to do it the other way around, to do the research that I love, to model it after examples that I love, and then find the home. And sometimes that's about being in conversation with certain disciplinary interests. So when I'm more actively writing poetry in poetry conversation, I'm more aware of the poetry journals I want to be in. Or if I'm in anthropology, I regularly present at the American Anthropological Association. I'm reading the Council of Anthro and Education Quarterly Journal, and I'm more aware of what the conversation that's taking place there. More and more I'm on social media. So I'm in this bilingual research SIG that I just sent our class a Facebook group link. And so I'm aware of the conversations happening there, and it's affecting my considerations and making me think, oh, I'd like to contribute to that conversation. So it's a balance of seeing what the need is and also being true to my interests and trying to find the match.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Kind of be in constantly have your like ears kind of perked up in the community of, the researchers.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you remember yourself in your graduate years, would there be anything that you would have done differently, or something that you could give us as new doctoral students, some piece of advice from that place of when you were there?
Yeah. Gosh, I don't know. I can never say what I would have done differently, because what's done is done. And you have to be content with the decisions you make, to know that every decision is taking you on a path. And what I've appreciated in my path is the themes that run through the path. So I've bounced around in many different conversational communities, but there's a theme of an interest in the arts and language acquisition and bilingualism that has helped me to create my own persona or character. And it helps me to have interdisciplinary interests and a wide range, but also a through line. So for example, I was assigned to work with different professors as part of my research assistantship when I was a doctoral student. And one professor wanted to work with me who was doing math research. This was the furthest thing from my interest. However, when I went to the bilingual school where I was doing my ethnography at the time, the teachers also wanted to focus on math. Why? Because they thought math was the easiest subject because it used the least amount of language. Now, any decent mathematician knows that there's absolutely full, rich disciplinary language that one must understand, that's often even more confusing because you have commonplace words that are used for different meanings in math. Mm-hmm. Table, chart, scale. I mean, all these things have nuanced meaning in the math context. So I felt intuitively that they were incorrect in the perception that language didn't matter in the math classroom. And I wanted to collaborate with a math education expert. So it was a wonderful collaboration. It ended up being part of 2 joint publications that we wrote together. And so I think one invitation to you guys to consider is never look at the invitations for your research assistantships and classes as opportunities, endless opportunities. Sometimes I would be unhappy in a class. I would think, oh, this class isn't really my interest, or, but the better part of me, the part of me that was successful would find what was interesting, find the value, find the points of connection, work harder, take leadership. So with that math professor, it wasn't a natural fit, but we both harnessed the opportunities, and it was a joy to me to take a leadership role in our project and suggest that she look at bilingual issues, which hadn't occurred to her. So to have courage, to trust your inner wisdom and to offer it to the faculty with whom you're working, to find opportunities to collaborate, because whatever you have as doctoral students, time and the purpose of collecting data, and the senior faculty or the tenured faculty you're working with or the research faculty, we have the need and the experience to write for a public audience, but we don't have perhaps as much drive or time to be starting very new big studies. So it's a wonderful possibility to collaborate. So it serves you both. So I would say look for opportunities to work with as many people as possible, but to also create a consistent theme in your work too.
Thank you. And by creating a consistent theme, would you, from your personal experience, recommend starting as early as we can to find that uniting theme, the just common theme? Because you mentioned that art has been with you like your whole life, starting middle school. And so you kind of always felt guided by that. Yeah. I guess my question is, what if we as graduate students come to first year and we still searching for that guiding theme?
Yeah. Well, you probably have more of it than you think.
Right.
You applied to be a PhD student because you were driven by something.
Right.
So, math was never my theme. So I connected it to my theme of bilingualism and the creative mind, So I think it's really about welcoming opportunities to expand upon what you think is your thing,
right.
To be flexible and know that every step takes you closer to another version, expansive version of who you're becoming. No one ever starts with the expertise. In fact, right now, even though I always loved art, I've always written poetry since I was very young, I still feel sometimes like I'm a beginner. I think being in touch with beginner's mind and always pursuing the next best level of excellence is also really important. And you can become an expert with disciplined focus in a short amount of time. So giving the gift of graduate study to yourself now means you're taking yourself seriously and finding a path. You go on it. It's not really your thing, change to the other path. As long as there's a consistent movement, and to just trust the movement that it's going to teach you the lessons it must.
And speaking, kind of connecting to what you just said, have you ever questioned your place in academia? Like, not just your place, but have you ever thought, what if I did something else? And if you had these doubts, did you tame them somehow? Well, obviously, since you're in academia now.
Oh, always. I mean, I just last night, my friend who I was in many plays with in college. My senior year, I was in a few plays that we both had leading roles with each other, and we lived in the same place. And I admired his work as an actor, and I think the feeling was mutual. And we graduated, and I went to teach bilingual education in LA, and he went to Juilliard to become a professional actor. And he just directed a feature-length film, and it was just screened at a film festival, and I had the privilege of seeing it, and it's a marvelous film. He acts in it, he directed it, it has a star cast, and I thought to myself, I still think to myself, what if I had stayed in performance? I went to LA to teach. I didn't have the resources. I didn't think I had, and I didn't have the resources to fund my full-time acting career when I graduated. I had to have a job. And I think that was a lucky burden for me because I have been able to figure out how to bring in performance and directing into the world of education in a way that I can't regret. But sometimes I wonder if I'd stayed only an artist, what might have I accomplished? But then I think that's why I'm in the world and that's why he's in the world. And it takes a whole lot of us to do a lot of good. So it's a very fine film.
Well, do you mind sharing what the film is?
The title is Before, During, After. Before / during / after. And I'll be glad to send the link. It was so fantastic. And I couldn't believe it.
Check that out. And another thing I'd like to ask, any future, like you mentioned that your book is about to be published, about to come out, you said in February, right?
Yeah.
Anything do you envision for yourself in the future? Any other projects you're looking forward to working?
So I'm always writing poems. I have a poetry group that I try to maintain so that I motivate myself to get a poem to a newer place. It's been harder to write for me during the pandemic. I've kept writing some poems, some COVID-19 poems. My student who has finished her dissertation has been such an inspiration, Kuo Zhang, and she and I are working on translating a poet from China who spent his young life as in the peasant class as a miner. So he was doing very dangerous work in the silver mines. And while doing this work, he was writing poems. So it's very unusual person, and he suffered great injuries. And now his poems are being recognized as the most profound poems of a working class person in China, which is remarkable. So she and I are collaborating to translate his work into English, and it's very exciting. A Romance language faculty has been translating my work, my poems, into Spanish, which I speak Spanish somewhat fluently, but it's a very different experience to be translated. The feeling was nothing short of ecstatic. Like I've never felt understood and in such care as being translated by a professional translator. So I want to write about what literary translation helps us understand about language teaching and learning. And I have notes and I have an article I plan to write, but I do feel that the translators, professional interpreters, I should say, have a lot of understanding of the nuance that a bilingual person strives for in everyday life, to be able to be understood fully. And I want to write about that.
This is something really strikes a chord with me personally, because I was trained as a translator. And I've been talking about, certain translation aspects and thinking about them. And I completely agree that the translator is like a co-creator of your work, kind of like you're working as a team on constructing and deconstructing the meaning and bringing that meaning to life in a new language. It's magic. It's like pure magic.
It is.
Literary translation.
Yeah, and every bilingual parent or student, I wish that we could all taste that experience as often as possible. Like it's such a gift and it takes so much time. I don't know, I just feel like there's something very revelatory about trying to translate someone else's work and being translated, and teaching teachers that we always say translation is like what you don't want in a foreign language class. You don't want, language can't be translated, but I don't know. So anyway, maybe we'll work on this together. Who knows?
Take a note about that. Another thing that we all thought about, and I myself personally would completely agree, any advice or any tricks that you developed of maintaining life and work balance, because your career is so active. You are doing so many things. You're involved in so many projects.
Mm.
How does that work with
Yeah.
life?
How does that work with life? Well, one is to consistently, you know, like the stone cutter, always come to the mountain with your little pickaxe. Like nothing is made in a day or overnight. So you just have to make consistent time. You have to welcome failure as an opportunity to acknowledge, to reflect when you get something turned away, or a bad grade, or you displease someone with your work. That's almost the best thing you can do, because you learn how to respond to criticism. You learn, if you can, to take what is good from the criticism, what you can learn, and you learn how to stand up for your work if you're misunderstood. You have to learn that stamina. So I think it's important to just keep doing and producing. Try to be on your own mat. That's what they say in yoga class. Like, it's very tempting, and it's hard for me still sometimes not to look over and see, you know, what is she doing? What is he doing? What movie is he making? But the lesson is to, okay, but what do I have to be content? And if you're not content, if you feel those feelings of envy or jealousy or regret, then it's a time for you to think, okay, what do I need to do to repair? What can bring me to the moment, to being present in the moment? So I've taken a lot of meditation. I've done a lot of therapy. I've done a lot of yoga. I've done a lot of healing practices. I exercise regularly. I think it's very important. I have a morning exercise routine. I'm motivated by other people. So I know that if I have trouble showing up, if I have trouble finishing a project, I try to find a team, you know, somebody who can keep me accountable. In my graduate program, we had a team of people. My friend was developing a business called Chaos Consulting, and we would come together, and we were a composer, a person training to become a rabbi, myself finishing a PhD, and we would each go around, and one of us would help the other person to go the next step forward. We had peer buddies. And so if you needed to clean out your car because you couldn't work with that mess, someone would do something, would call you and say, have you started your car today? You know, you have to find the help within the financial means that you have. What helps you to work well? If you have a messy desk and you need to clean the desk, what helps you get to that place? What helps you get to the library? So you have to know yourself pretty well to know where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are. And you have to admit to those weaknesses, because they are your greatest strengths. That's where you ask for help. And if you know when you need help and where you need help, then you'll be able to move forward.
Thank you so much. But it just brings to me the idea that the PhD program, it's not only us doing research about certain field of our interest and delivering it, but it's so much self-search. It's so much learning about yourself and overcoming certain self-implication or limitations.
That's so true. And yet it's also about data. So what's so nice is the study can take you both deeper into yourself, but also give you something that's far from yourself or outside of yourself. And that's the happy place in between.
Yes, yeah. I think that's a very good point to finish our conversation here.
Great. Thank you.